Hi, my name is Kelly Frantz-Langford, and this is my case study. To bring a little context, we know that Susan has recently been hired as the building principal. The superintendent has asked her to spend the first year designing all of the programming and building that goes with the middle school and making the decisions that will lead to a successful start the next year. In order to do this, Susan developed a collaborative leadership team, and that leadership team's first task is to develop a philosophy and vision statement. Susan wanted to do this as a collaborative process. However, the team voted during one of the meetings for Susan to draft both the philosophy and the vision statement on her own, and then the committee would essentially vote yes or no, which is a conflict because Susan values a collaborative process and understands how important a philosophy and vision statement is to guiding the school, and understanding that we need stakeholder input in order to do that well. The history is that the community, at the beginning, not everybody was on board, so they already had 3 factions going into whether or not they should even have a new middle school. Susan is new to the area, so she's an experienced teacher and an assistant principal, but she doesn't know all of the local customs and norms, hasn't met the students, families, or a lot of the community. And again, that committee has to, the first task is to do a philosophy and a vision statement. The committee agreed to some guidelines, which includes acting as a democracy, which each member having 1 vote. That consensus would be preferred, the preferred method for reaching a decision. Also, they know that the vision statement needs to reflect the core values and beliefs of the committee members and the community stakeholders, and that all stakeholders should be given the opportunity to critique the elements of the proposed vision. Stakeholders include students, parents, staff, school board members, and other members of the community. We know the importance of a vision statement is critical, particularly when creating a new school. The principal needs to ensure that the vision is a collaborative process and that reflects the core values, beliefs, and priorities of the community. The vision will guide the mission statements, and the mission statements will guide the daily decisions for the development of the school and for the first few years of operation. At a glance, we know the advisory committee values a few things. First, it was clearly stated that they value authority, and either that's a community or a cultural value for some members, as far as respecting authority and expertise in decision making. They value time. They want to make sure that they have enough time to complete their task and be ready for the new school year. They also want to make sure that they're not creating unnecessary tension or conflict, and they assume that the leadership style of the new principal is a visionary leadership, meaning that the leader should be the one that guides the vision and brings everyone else along. The ethical and legal concerns or considerations are as follows. The ethical issue is that with the principal solely designing the philosophy and vision statement, it violates the professional standard for educational leaders because the vision statement should be done as a collaborative process with school and community members. The guidelines of the advisory group state that the consensus is the preferred option with stakeholder feedback, so there's also an ethical concern within the advisory committee. And also, we know that it's difficult to act ethically and with consideration to all staff members and students' backgrounds and cultures when there's little opportunity to gather input and data that would help drive those decisions. There aren't any apparent legal considerations or legal issues with this. When Susan designed the committee, it was in consultation with the superintendent and knowing that the final vision statement would be brought to the school board for discussion and vote. Susan should probably clarify with the superintendent that this committee would not violate the Kansas Open Meeting Act. So here is a concise statement of the issue. How does Susan create a philosophy and vision statement that aligns with her ethical values and professional norms while respecting the democratic decision of stakeholders, and in this case, the stakeholders being the advisory committee. So here are some additional facts. We know that the middle school, most of the kids will be between 11 and 13 years. The staff are mostly teachers that are currently teaching within the district. Farmers in the community are a very active stakeholder group, and specifically large landowners were not on board to build this new middle school. However, a group of newer residents felt strongly about the need of the new school. And we also know enrollment is increasing by 2% a year. What we don't know is gender and diversity factors within the learning community and local customs and norms of the community. The school district consists of 2 rural communities with an increasing population, and there are a number of large landowners, and farming is an important business in the community. We know that the public school will be inclusive of all students with all abilities. We have several returning teachers that were hired and had been teaching the same age group in the district, and the grade levels will be 6 through 8. We know that there will be an impact on stakeholders. The philosophy and vision that are not representative of stakeholders would have a negative impact because the mission and the daily decisions are based on a vision that doesn't work. For this school, it's particularly a vulnerable time because it will influence the structural changes that could be more costly in the future to repair. It could also cost future community collaboration if the principal does not make an effort to work across factions early in the process. It could also have implications on the advisory committee process. So Susan needs to tread lightly in how she makes her decisions because she has to navigate how to work with this group moving forward. The first vote was a vote that was made without engaging others and without working towards consensus, and so we know that it probably won't yield the best results. But it also sets a precarious precedent of not taking time to really explore and work through challenging issues. As far as who's missing, we know that independently forming a philosophy or vision does not allow other stakeholders to give input, including students, parents, staff members, and other community members. If Susan were to follow this procedure, there would be little chance for the unusual voices to be heard in order to shape the process, and if Susan values equity and diversity, we have to reserve spaces for all voices. In addition, there's no opportunity to work with those in strong opposition to the school, and the ability to understand and lead people across the community is critical for a principal. So Susan has a few options. One, she could accept the group's vote as part of the democratic process and draft a philosophy to present at the next meeting. 2, she could refuse to draft the philosophy and let the committee know her decision, and so that she is defending her values as a leader. There are some middle-of-the-road choices. She could draft components of the philosophy and bring it to the committee for discussion. She could synthesize her understanding of the vote in that she could bring a draft or a final draft to the next committee meeting, but independently gather information from stakeholders in order to form that draft. Susan could send out a written response detailing her ethical concerns and explaining the assumption of her leadership style as contradictory to what she's expressed to the group. She could also reach out to committee members individually who didn't speak and ask for their thoughts and see if she could gain momentum to request another motion on the topic. There are pros and cons to each of those decisions. If she adheres to the committee vote, she respects the democratic process and decision of the committee. It could expedite a statement of both philosophy and vision to go to the school board. And she might be able to take that collaboration and possibly move it forward down the road. Cons are that it sets up the first decision to avoid collaboration and consensus, it alienates stakeholders and could have long-term harmful impacts to the learning community. She could refuse the committee vote, which models her personal commitment and practice of collaboration, and possibly then that way could lead to a more inclusive mission and vision statement. But then she makes her first decision as an autocrat instead of a democrat. She alienates community members and represented factions, and she can create more conflict within the group. She could acknowledge the draft request but gather input. So that would be respectful of the democratic process and committee leadership. It acknowledges the concerns of time and expertise that the group wanted in the final draft. She's practicing her ethical commitment to collaboration and shared decision making. However, it could cause conflict if the teammate feels like this violates the intent of the vote. She may not be able to finish in time because we know gathering input takes time, thus reinforcing the belief that time is a factor in developing this mission statement, and it might be challenging for one person to synthesize all of the input. There are pros and cons as far as drafting components of a philosophy, but not a final version. Pros and cons for sending a written response explaining the ethical dilemma. And here are some pros and cons for contacting each member separately of the committee and asking for clarification and a new motion. Susan has chosen to seek the middle ground and ask for clarification and permission to get stakeholder feedback, as long as I could provide the draft for the committee review by the next meeting. I would review my plan for seeking input and ask the committee if that addresses their concerns, including timeliness, sharing my experience, and avoiding committee conflict. So if I were going to imagine making the decision, step one, I know I would need to create a plan in order to bring this forward to the group, listing stakeholders, methods for getting timely feedback, a timeline so I can assure them that I am understanding of their concern with timeliness, and a draft of questions. My next move would be to speak with the chair directly to see if she would agree that this matches with the intent of the group, and to see if she would have any problems with me going forward and trying to gather as much stakeholder input as possible. Either way, if she agrees, I know that there are things that I need to do as far as reaching out to the rest of the members to make sure that that's okay, gathering the data and analyzing it. If she disagrees, I know that I need to do more research and possibly try to review some of the previous school board comments or reach out to other leaders in the district to see what shaped their philosophy and vision statements. There are some things that will have to occur either way, such as reviewing the district's mission and vision and making sure we're in alignment, making sure that we have statements on core values, priorities, and then forming a draft. The presentation to the committee where I present the draft, I definitely want to make sure that I am giving the opportunity for people to say what's missing, and that making sure that we're representing all groups. And also I would take that opportunity to make a strong recommendation for how to move forward with the vision statement as a collaborative process. Finally, with the draft, we need to make sure for the philosophy statement that it includes core values, that it can connect data use, digital citizenship, equity, diversity, technology, and community to a vision statement. The statements need to be broad enough that a vision statement can be developed. At least that would cover a 3 to 5 year cycle, and that the statements align with the district's mission and vision. So that is how I would propose to consider the ethical dilemma and move forward. Here are the references that I used, and I appreciate your time and consideration today. Thank you.